Thank you for joining this morning. My name's Nick Stancliffe. I work in the Microsoft team here at Tech Data. We're going to spend the next 30 to 40 minutes taking you through what Microsoft call the modern meeting experience, or the Teams meeting life cycle is the way they refer to it, and it's all about really using Teams platform to really maximize the meeting experience. You know, we're all in a time where I think we all feel this, where we're sort of back to back on calls a lot of the time and maybe jumping from one meeting to the next, and those little increments where we can kind of save time and collaborate, you know, both before and after the meeting as well as during the meeting, you know, can sometimes help in terms of our productivity. And there's some nice ways that Microsoft Teams can help us in terms of doing that. I'm going to share this with you today. First of all, I'd like to sort of bring your attention to the concept of the customer immersion experience, which is where all about bringing the technology to life in front of the end customer. Really about kind of evangelizing the technology and showing specific use cases whereby customers can make use of Microsoft 365 to transform their business from a collaboration and a productivity perspective. For those of you who aren't aware, there is actually a platform which is available to all partners, which is called the Microsoft CDX, or CDX transform.microsoft.com is the URL platform, and this is a complete demo, immersion experience, and lab platform that, as a Microsoft partner, you can benefit from. What this means is that you can create specific demo environments. So you can create demo tenants. Those tenants will be populated with users and licensed users, so that you can start to showcase the technology. There's also what Microsoft call these customer immersion experiences. Again, this is where you have access to spin up a specific demo tenant. And then there's also guides that Microsoft provide that allow you to kind of walk through various different scenarios that you can act out with a customer. So you can effectively spin up the tenant. You can provide an alias to each of the users within the end customer, so they get access to log on as that user into a virtual environment. And then through the use of the scripted template, you can then talk through various different scenarios and how the Microsoft technology can then support those scenarios for the end customer. And the idea being is that the customer is hands-on. You get them to do things in the environment, create teams, chat, collaborate on documents, etc., and really kind of make the most of the technology experience. So the CIE is a very powerful tool in that regards. The other thing you can also do is create, as I mentioned, you can create specific demos. So, and these demos can be based on product, so based on solutions, so Modern Workplace or Power Platform. They could be based on industry, so you could have a specific demo that's education specific, and you'd get an education tenant and an education sort of talk track and PowerPoint presentations if you're presenting to a specific customer, or you can do them at a product level. So as an example here, if we went into sort of education and we looked at Modern Workplace, getting started with education demos might be an option. And you can spin up the tenant from here. You'll get a sort of all these assets. So how to use the environment, demo platform guidance, getting started with the demos, hands-on tours, etc. So it really gives you all the information and all of the content that you would need to create an end customer presentation or demonstration, if you like. So some really powerful tools in here. Likewise, if you just simply want to create a blank tenant, you can go into the environment section and create tenant, and you can just build out here the M365 Business Premium, for example, and you can create your own tenant environment, either 90 days or a year. Create the tenant, and it will provide you with I can see I've done some here. So as an example, this one as an enterprise tenant, it will provide you with credentials for both an administrator and a user and the password, and you can just log on through the portal.office.com and access that environment. And as I say, you'll have full list of users and assigned licenses, so you can pretty much do everything you would do in a production state in that demo environment. So really good platform to make use of as a partner if you've got customer presentations and demos. So specifically focusing on the team's meeting experience today, as I said at the start, I think we're all sort of looking for ways that we can improve, our productivity, make those extra kind of 5-10 minutes count during the day, especially as we're sort of back to back on calls a lot of the time. And Microsoft have sort of come up with this concept of the meeting life cycle, and it's really a way of them differentiating their go-to-market positioning of Teams as a collaboration tool versus other competitors in the market, so tools like Zoom, etc. And we'll see as we go through kind of at the various different stages of the meeting what you can do to really bring that to life. So we'll talk about the meeting lifecycle concepts, talk about some best practices, and we'll talk about kind of the follow-up stages of the meeting, and also how you can leverage some of the security and compliance features within Microsoft 365 and bring those to the forefront within Teams. I think that's very important when we talk about Teams as a collaboration tool. It's leveraging that sort of onion skin of Microsoft security technology, if you like, that makes sure that the users and the data that's being shared and the files that are being shared are compliant, in accordance with company policy. So we think about this concept of the meeting lifecycle, and it has these sort of 3 stages really. You've got the before, the during, and then the after stage of the meeting. So before the meeting is really about getting ready or preparing for that meeting. Any insights, setting the context, setting the agenda, getting everyone kind of on the same page before that meeting starts. I think you probably experience yourself, you join a meeting in the first 10 minutes, you're kind of setting the agenda or setting the context for the call, and you sort of lost the first 10 minutes of that meeting. So getting that done beforehand helps save time, helps us become more efficient when we're on the call, when really the objective is to get everyone's voice heard and actually do the thing that you were planning to do on that meeting, which is, maybe collaborate in PowerPoint or in Excel or whatever, and actually get the job done. And then you've got the after the meeting part, which is, you've taken some meeting notes potentially. You might have collaborated on some documents. They're all stored within the chat of the meeting that's been scheduled, so it's all in one place. It allows you to then track and follow through on actions and follow-ups, and everyone can communicate within the same medium using things like app mentions to call out specific people and specific actions to make sure we continue the momentum off the back of the meeting. And then, in terms of what we can do, these are some of the things, some of the tools that we have within Teams that kind of bring that to life. So, again, the before meeting experience, we can do things like chat with the participants. We can collaborate on documents and presentations prior to the meeting, and we can review historic documents and things like that. During the meeting, as I say, is really the time when the work gets done and co-authoring becomes, kind of a big part of that. We can start to introduce things like, live captioning. So if we've got people in the audience for the meeting that maybe come from different backgrounds or different nationalities, we can introduce live captioning to make sure that the meeting is fully inclusive. And we can also do things like now, like automate or the recording of meeting notes or transcripts during the meeting, so someone doesn't have to necessarily sit there and type out the notes using AI technology and voice recognition. That can now be done from within the Teams meeting itself. And obviously we've got some great tools like Whiteboard and Digital Ink, where we can start to brainstorm and whereas in the real world of being in a meeting room, you might not get that same experience. We can at least try and replicate that with the integrated Whiteboard functionality. And then, again, with the after meeting piece, things like at mentions and that whole kind of being able to communicate, directly with certain people within that meeting, make sure that they're accountable for certain actions and next steps after that meeting. So again, that's a very powerful way of being able to keep on top of the communication. And I thought this is quite a nice slide in terms of, how you get the most from your meeting. Again, sort of thinking about the 4 areas of the meeting life cycle, which we've mentioned. Obviously the ease and quality of experience. The fact that you can join a Teams meeting from any device, from your laptop, from your if you're in a hybrid scenario, that might be something that in future is going to be the new normal. So if you're in a meeting room on a Surface Hub or some sort of device. Or if you're on your mobile, you've got that ability to join meetings. So having the ability to access from any device. We talked a bit about live captioning and searchable transcripts. So if you use the meeting record option, you can search for specific words or phrases during that meeting. Now the meeting recordings are actually recorded straight to OneDrive. Whereas previously they were recorded into Stream, which is, from a OneDrive perspective, means we can share the recordings and we can apply specific permissions to those recordings as we would do with any other document in terms of who can download them, view them, etc. So really powerful way of being able to continue that kind of collaboration post meeting. And we know things like blurred backgrounds, custom backgrounds have been around for a little while. The noise cancelling feature is also something that's been recently added to kind of blur out that background peripheral noise that you might get, if you're working at home and the dog's barking, or you get a delivery that turns up or something like that. So again, powerful tools that are being added to 365. And the compliance and security piece that we'll touch on a little bit later. Some of the things that you can leverage within the Teams app as part of that. So if we think about what are the different ways that we can schedule meetings within Teams, and there's a couple of ways really. You've got we can set invite, and this is really important because in Teams and Outlook as 2 applications, they work off the same back end. They use Exchange, they use SharePoint, and they use OneDrive. And both applications are intrinsically linked. So if we create an invite in Outlook, for example, that will replicate into Teams, and also vice versa. So, we can continue to create and manage our diaries through Outlook, or we can start to move that into a Teams environment, and we can create Teams invites from within the application itself for one-to-one meetings. Or if we've created a specific team for maybe like a project or piece of work that we're doing, we can create specific channel meetings that includes everyone from within that channel, and we can create specific calendars and things that hook off the back of that as well. So it's important that we understand the various different ways that we can create teams. That we can create meetings. So one of the things I'm going to do now is just to jump into an environment that I set up actually through the CDX platform. So I'm now in the Contoso Electronics environment, and I'm actually signed on as one of their users, Megan. So you can see here I've got my portal.office.com homepage. I've got my my Outlook calendar, or my Outlook emails and calendar here. And I've also got my Teams application that I'll be working in as well. So if we start by thinking about how do I set up a meeting, as we said, a couple of ways you can do it. I could do it through my Outlook calendar. So by simply add in an invite. As you can see here, we get some suggested times from Adele of when's going to be suitable for her. We've actually pre-selected the fact that Teams meetings will be on by default. So that means that every time I create a meeting invite, it will automatically embed the Teams link. And I'll show you how you do that in a minute. So we can see here we've got access to Adele's calendar, and we're going to create a new meeting called Marketing Strategy, and we're going to send that to Adele. And we can see that event's been created there. Now, before I move into Teams, one thing I'll show you quickly is we can set, by going to my Outlook settings here, by looking in the calendar, and then by going to events and invitations, we can actually tick this box which adds online meetings to all of our meetings. So as I said before, that means that we by default will see the link for the Teams meeting in all of our invites that we send out. Another important thing to note that's a relatively new addition is the meeting options icon. So previously you'd have to select your meeting options from within the meeting. These are now being made available prior to the meeting. So either if you're in your Outlook on your desktop or on the web, we can predetermine some of the meeting options here. So we can say, can anyone bypass the lobby? We can see things like who can present, who's allowed to speak. Various different settings that we can make as the meeting organizer before the meeting happens, and we can do that directly from Outlook. Okay, so I've now jumped from Outlook straight into my Teams calendar here, and you'll see that same meeting has now been replicated within Teams, and I can join that from here. So yeah, again, it's showing that sort of interoperability between the two platforms, and you can see that, or the two applications, sorry, you can see Adele has accepted. I'm just going to go ahead and cancel that meeting for now. What we can then do from a meeting perspective, if I'm in my calendar, I've got the option up here. I can schedule a meeting. I can schedule a webinar, which is a new functionality that Microsoft have recently launched, and you might see that in your tenant. And we can also schedule live events. Typically, these are live broadcasts for over 10,000 participants. Webinars tend to be for smaller groups where you want more sort of interactivity, maybe. Live events better for sort of broadcast town halls, large corporate gatherings, those types of things. For this example, we're going to create a new Teams meeting, and I'm going to invite Adele again. I can see that she is free. I'm going to call it marketing again. Again, we can use the Adele's presence from our Outlook calendar. We can see what meetings she's got scheduled. We can see that she's available. Again, it's using the information from her Outlook calendar. And we can then schedule this meeting in. So we're going to call it the marketing strategy meeting. And we're going to send that invite to Adele. Okay, so we can see that now appeared in our calendar. What you'll then see when you click in here is we've then got various different options within the meeting invite itself. So we've got the chat thread that's been created. There's an area for file sharing, the meeting schedule, notes, and the whiteboard. So what we could do as an example in the meeting notes is we could set an agenda in here. Say FY21 FY. Trust. So that's our the start of our agenda. What I could then do as part of this is I could share a document from my OneDrive. So, for example, International Marketing Strategy Word document. I could upload that into the actual chat. So we can see here now we've created from that marketing meeting. We've created a chat. Adele's been invited. We can see here that the meeting notes have been created and the file has been shared. And Adele is going to tell me that she's seen that file, which is fantastic. I might want to. So she's saying, could we add the budget to the agenda as well? Little tick there. So what I could then do is through clicking on the three little breadcrumbs, I could open this document in the browser, and I could then we could then work on this prior to the meeting to make sure that everything is correct. If we had other participants that we were presenting to, for example, so I could maybe sort of add a new comment, and I could sort of mention Adele and say, Adele, please could you make sure pre-reqs and assign that as a task to Adele. She could then look at that, make any changes, maybe make a comment in here. What she would also see would be a notification that there's an action on her, and we can see up here through Adele's presence that we know she's already working actively in the document and she's on page 5. So it just shows, we can together we can collaborate in this document. We can speak to each other. Again, she's made she's made a comment there. We can work on this prior to the meeting. If there was Adele and Megan were both working, like I say, to present to maybe the board of directors, we could be collaborating on this document prior to the meeting, ready for the actual presentation. So really good way of being able to communicate. So as I say, you can upload various different files. I can open those in the browser, the desktop. I could download if I wanted to, but really, better off keeping it in the Teams environment. I can see the details of the meeting again here. I've got the option to go to my meeting options to set any prereqs that I wanted, and also up here as well. And again, I've got my meeting notes. So that's an example of a way that you could prepare for a meeting using the collaboration functionality within the Office apps, and also by creating chats and app mentions and those types of things. If we then were to join the meeting, and I'm going to just turn my audio and camera off for this. So when we join the meeting, obviously we've got different ways we can present. Again, from looking at the 3 breadcrumbs, we can do things like set our devices up, show the meeting details. These new features were added a few months ago. So for smaller meetings, you've got the standard gallery view. For larger meetings, you can now have a large gallery view. I forget the exact number, but it gives you the option to see more people on the screen at any point in time. And you've also got together mode, which is these kind of like more, I guess, the sort of experiences where you can be sat in an auditorium, or where you can kind of feel a bit more sort of inclusive within the meeting. We can do recordings. So as I mentioned, recordings are now saved into OneDrive, and they can be shared with the various different permissions. And you'll get a little notification at the top when you're recording to let you know that meeting is being recorded, and all participants will have that same notification. And obviously we can do things like share as well. So I can share my screen. I can share a whiteboard if I wanted to. I can also share a PowerPoint. I don't actually have one here, but one of the things you can do through PowerPoint Live is actually from me as a presenter. If I share a PowerPoint Live presentation, my experience would be that I would see the PowerPoint presentation on the left, and on the right I would see all my meeting notes, and I can then scroll through those as I'm going through the presentation. And then down the right hand side you'd see the actual people within the meeting, so you can still see who's involved. So that's a really nice tool as a presenter to have. It feels, if you feel in control of the meeting, you've got your slides, you've got your notes, and you can see who's actually involved. So that's a really good tip for actually using the presentation. So that's kind of the sort of during the meeting phase, and then once the meeting has finished, then it might be that, as an example, you've been presenting and you want to upload the presentation that you've been working on during the meeting. In this example here, our engagement initiatives, and I share that with the team. Importantly, what you can also do now is set the same controls as you would be able to set in, say, OneDrive or in Teams through sharing a document. So I can establish, is that link available to everyone? Am I going to allow this document to be edited? I can set an expiration date. I can block it from being downloaded, or I could set a password. This would be particularly important if, for example, you had external participants joining the meeting, and maybe you wanted to share the content once the meeting is finished, but actually you don't want them to be able to download the content. You just want to be able to view it in the web browser, and you only want to set them to be able to view it for a certain number of days. It could be, for example, it's a proposal to a customer with a quote on it, and that quote is valid for 90 days. So therefore, you set the expiration date for 90 days after the meeting. And you can get those controls around how they access it. And again, you do things like password protect. So having the ability to set these controls from within the Teams chat, as you would do within OneDrive or within SharePoint, I think is a really good addition and something that's very very valuable to the Teams chat conversation. So I've just posted that in here, and again we can then you could even sort of do things like app mentions and say, hi Adele, please can you do your actions by next Thursday. Adele would see that come up in her little activities barrel at the top, and she would then be able to jump in and complete that. And you can see there the little thumbs up. I think the use of app mentions, just on that topic, is something that's is really powerful. And one kind of scenario I thought around the whole app mention piece was if you, and we all have this, right? We come back off of a week or 2 weeks holiday and we've got maybe 300, 400, 500 emails sat in our inbox, and we spend half a day going through our emails to figure out what are my priorities. If everyone is working out of Teams in the same manner, then if you've got colleagues that app mention you for certain things, you can very quickly, when you come back from holiday, go straight to Teams, straight to your activities, look at where have I been app mentioned, what are my priorities, and then you can coordinate your day based on those app mentions rather than having to go through hundreds of emails to find out the relevant information. So app mentions used in the right way can be very powerful, and I think it's good, especially when people may be out of the office, to make sure that things that you need being done when they get back are prioritized. So I think using app mentions in the right way creates a lot of value for a business if you like I said, if you do it in the right manner. So that was a kind of a very quick run through of an example of a meeting lifecycle as we've discussed. Also want to talk to you a little bit about the concept of the sort of meeting governance and security, and some things that we might need to consider. So as an example, how do we secure external users when they access Teams in our domain? So by default now, guest access is enabled within the admin center of Teams. So we can invite guests into Teams channels. Do we want to consider prompting multi-factor authentication when a guest accesses the team, and do we want to set out specific terms and conditions that they accept when they access our tenant? Sensitive information that's being shared during a meeting, how do we potentially control that? And what other compliance controls do we put in place for sharing things like personally identifiable information or financial information within a Teams chat, for example? What if the meeting participant accidentally posted a malicious document or a link that was a potential kind of phishing or spoofing attack, and how do we combat that? And without going into sort of too much technical detail, I thought this slide was actually really quite powerful in terms of showing an example of the kind of architecture controls that an administrator has within the Teams environment and how it leverages all of the Microsoft 365 security technology. On the left-hand side, you can see the Azure, administration, so everything within Azure Active Directory. Everything from kind of how you control the creation of teams and groups, and classification, the expiry of teams. Quite often you'll find that once what happens when a project finishes or runs its course, you want to be able to have a natural conclusion to that project, and you also want the team to expire once that project is finished. Controlling guest access we've spoken about in terms of use, and maybe even conditional access around MFA and things like that. So a lot we can do within Azure Active Directory to support the security of the user within the Teams environment. And then generally from a M365 administration perspective, from a security, from a compliance perspective, things like e-discovery and auditing. We can do lots of compliance and content search, and things like we'll talk a little bit around the sharing of sensitive information within the context of a Teams chat. So very important that we understand this. And from a partner perspective, this gives you a lot of opportunity to create consultancy services, practices around teams from a from an administration and a governance perspective, and how we control that. I think one of the big things everyone still talks about is this notion of the teams kind of sprawl and the number of teams that are created, and how do we control that. And one of the first things probably to consider is actually who has access within the business to create teams, and should that be everyone, or should that be locked down to certain people, and how do you actually then create a workflow that where a user can apply to have the rights to create a team. That starting point I think is really important when you're setting out the foundations of best practices. But I thought this was a really good slide and kind of highlights some of the tools that we can leverage within the context of teams. And just as an example, I just took a couple of screenshots of this. So I actually set up a guest access for our demo environment that we have using our IURs to access the Contoso environment that I was just in. So I can, from within the Teams application in my demo environment within our IUR environment, I can access the guest the Contoso environment. And the first time I do it, I've set it up so I'm prompted to accept a set of terms. And actually, I'll be prompted to multi-factor authentication every time I access that team in a different tenant. Another really important one that we spoke about is the concept of safe links and safe attachments. Now, this has historically always been something that's been used within the context of Exchange for email. So being able to provide security for a user who may receive an email that's got a suspicious link that might redirect you to a website that then tries to dupe you into submitting personal information or company information, or a suspicious attachment which might have malware associated with it. These safe links and safe attachments can now be applied within the context of a Teams chat. So if, for example, you see here, Nesta has put a link in to a Teams chat, that's been picked up by the safe links policy, and it directs the user to this website, which has been blocked as per the company's policy. And as an administrator, you can also then receive a notification off the back of that, so you can see exactly what's happening, who's posted it, what's gone on, and you can do a full investigation. So important that we can use that in the context of Teams as much as we do within email. And this is available. This feature is available within Office Defender, ATP. Office Microsoft 365 Office Defender, or Defender for Office, which was rebranded from Office ATP a few months ago. So that product is available as an add-on or within Microsoft 365 Business Premium. And then the second part I wanted to just highlight was around data loss prevention. So we can use DLP to help protect and classify specific information, be that personally identifiable information like credit card number, like date of birth, like passport numbers, etc., or things like financial information such as credit card numbers, things of that nature. Now, traditionally, that's been applied. If you can apply policies to files that are shared within Teams using SharePoint and OneDrive, but actually you can now also apply those policies in the context of a Teams chat. So here again, we've seen Nesta, and he's actually sent in the context of a conversation, he's actually sent a credit card number to a participant. That's been picked up and blocked, as you can see by the highlighted piece there, and that number doesn't actually get the recipient never actually receives that number. So really powerful, again, especially in the context of having maybe guests within a team. If you've got guests that are sat within a channel and you may be having a chat, it could be, I don't know, go back to the context of marketing, and you could be talking to a marketing agency and then you need to pay for certain services, and they ask for the credit card number. You put that credit card number in, and policy picks it up and blocks it. So it's just a way of being able to reinforce the policy and make sure the user in the organization doesn't compromise the company's data. So really powerful that we can bring that not just into the files that sit within Teams, but also within the chat feature as well. Okay, so hopefully that gives you kind of a bit of an overview of some of the different things we can do with Teams from a meeting and a chat context and how it leverages some of the 365 architecture. I wanted to just sort of change tack slightly and talk about our 365 security baselines that we've created, and this very much follows on from the last couple of points that I made around safe links, safe attachments, and around DLP. And what we've sort of been working on is the ability to script or automate the deployment of some of these features so that you don't have to as a partner. So effectively, we can help you reduce your time or your administrator's time putting policies in place. We can support you in terms of creating a standardized baseline template for all of your customers and hopefully add some additional services to that customer by providing, as I say, a baseline security position for that tenant. What does that mean? So effectively, we've created, through the use of Azure Automation, some PowerShell runbooks. Those runbooks are basically set up to run every night at midnight. They're injected into the tenant of the customer, and that's done through a purchase in Stream 1. And those runbooks are effectively automating some of the policies that I mentioned. So it does things like enforcing MFA for all users, whilst creating a break glass user exempt group. It does things like enforcing the safe link, safe attachment policies. It enforces things like DLP policies for UK templates, as well as doing other things such as setting passwords to never expire. So this is a Microsoft's kind of best case recommendation now, is that passwords should always be set to never expire, on the basis that passwords get weaker over time as people update them every 90, 30 days, whatever the company policy is. And we at Tech Data have actually now moved to a password never expire policy. So that is automatically turned on. Things like disable calendar share, anonymous calendar share. Again, if your environment is compromised, typically they'll look to see, if people are out of the office and when they're out of the office and things like that. So that kind of reduces the risk. And also setting up email auto forwarding blocks. So again, if an account is compromised, one of the first things that the bad actor or the hacker will do is set up an auto forward rule on a shared mailbox. Could be a finance mailbox or an exec's mailbox. They'll keep viewing the traffic that's going in and out. And at a certain point in time, they will jump in and strike when the accounts team is asking the MD for approval for to pay some money. They might jump in and say, oh well, actually we approve it, but the bank details have changed to XYZ, and that's when you get caught and effectively money could be transferred to fraudulent accounts. So that's a very popular way that accounts can be compromised, and one thing you can do to mitigate that risk is to block auto forward rules. So that's one of the things we do within our solution. Beauty of the solution is actually no cost from a partner perspective. We make use of the 500 free automation minutes Microsoft provide each month. So actually, you're getting an awful lot of value in terms of account tenant config at no additional cost. The only cost to the customer is they have to have the right license, which we would always recommend as business premium on the basis that it has all the features there to activate. It can work with other features to a limited extent. But from yourself, from a reseller perspective, it means you can take the service and you can sort of build your own, your own customized configurations on top. So if you want to build your own email archiving policies, retention policies, etc., you can do that on top. This is giving you the baseline grounding to go and take to market. As we said, these are some of the policies on the left that it's creating, and we're leveraging that free runbooks automation account 500 minutes so that we don't have there's no cost associated for the partner. When you deploy the solution, it's done through Stream 1. On the right hand side here, you'll see basically a customized wizard. You can then decide which of the settings you want to turn on. You can turn them on at the point of deployment. You can also then, after the fact, go in through the Azure subscription and you can make amendments to those configurations after the fact, as I said. And important with things like MFA as well, to consider the change management impact of that. So if you suddenly turn on MFA for all the users, you might want to, run some training or give some guidance on how to set MFA up, to make sure that you don't suddenly receive a lot of calls into your help desk because people can't then access their PC when they try and log on the next day. So always think about kind of the knock-on effect of the things that you're going to be implementing as part of this. And again, gives you the opportunity to create some additional training and services around some of this stuff. And then finally, what we wanted to really show you was what are the differences between the security defaults that you get out of the box and then what Tech Data provide. And as you can see on the right, there's a lot more value that you can be gleaned from the Click to Run solution. Both in terms of the exempt break glass group from an MFA perspective, and then also the other policies that it's implementing. And like I said, the important thing here is that because it's running every 24 hours, it picks up any changes. An example, if you add a user to the tenant with a new license, it will pick that new user up and enroll it into the same policies as all the other users. If you have an administrator at the end customer that likes to go in and mess about with things, if they turn MFA off for a user, for example, it will pick it up and enforce that overnight. So it's making sure that the baselines stay consistent over time, so it becomes part of a managed service as well. So that was our Click to Run solution. So as I said, hopefully you can see some value in that, both in terms of from an automation perspective in terms of reducing time and cost, but also from a go-to-market perspective in terms of being able to add more layered security, to your 365 offering, and being able to sort of monetize on that as well. More than happy to have specific conversations around this. We can use things like the demo environments in the CDX platform to actually create a demo environment for you, inject the Click to Run solution into that, and you can see it working without having to first deploy it into a customer. So we can work with you in terms of how it looks and get some confidence in the solution before then rolling it out to customers. So if you've got any questions around that, more than happy to reach out, and we can set up follow-up calls and how that works from a deployment perspective. But that, I think we've just hit the 45-minute mark, and I said we'd be 30 to 40 minutes, so slightly over, but just about on time. Hopefully you found that session useful. We can share the slides of anyone that would like to see them. We are going to be running another session next week, another 30-minute session around things like how you manage files within Teams, how you manage or how you set up third-party applications or native applications such as Forms and Planner and things like this within Teams. So that will be the topic for next week. And then the final session was going to be focused on the new webinar feature that I mentioned has been released, and how you can start to use webinars within Teams to kind of address sort of a one-to-many approach with customers. So that'll be the next 2 weeks. The links for those will be posted on Yammer very shortly, and hopefully we look forward to seeing you then. Like I said, any questions, please reach out, and have a great day. Thanks, everybody.